Our scripture reading is Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2 from the English Standard Version. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Welcome into our Sunday evening devotional time. I'm glad you're taking a moment to join us. I hope that today was a day of worship for you. It can be a great day, a refreshing day when we take time to worship God. You know, worship is the activity of the disciple that calibrates our heart back to the proper relationship that we're always supposed to have with God. He is greater than us. We are in dependency of Him, and we honor Him in that position. Something about Monday to Saturday and all the busyness of our life can make us oftentimes forget that pretty quickly in the way that we relate to God, that we live and move, like Paul said, and have our very being simply because of Him. I'm breathing right now because He's allowing this world to continue, and I am His creation. So hopefully you've taken some time today to worship, and I want to take just a moment from Romans 12 to share some thoughts about worship with you and how this works together in the way that our lives get lived out day in and day out. First thing is important that you know what the word worship means. It's really broken down all the way back in its etymology, back to this idea of just worth-ship. Worth is the key word. Meaning in worship, what you're doing is saying something is of highest value to you. You're saying something is worth it to you. And what we learn from Jesus, especially in John chapter 4, is that the key characteristic of our worship that God is looking for is that it is true. He says He's looking for true worshipers, and true worship is done this way. This idea of worship being true means this, that what we say with our mouths about God is also what we believe in our hearts and in our minds. So when I say, the Lord is great with my mouth in a song or in a prayer, do I actually believe that He's great? When I say we should crown Jesus above all other things, do I actually with my heart believe that He is the most important thing? Do you see, we can't just say with our mouths but not have our hearts actually believe what we're saying. Jesus would call that vain worship or empty worship. And that is a dangerous place for us to be. And so when we think about worship, from Romans chapter 12, we notice a couple things here. The first one is motivation for worship. I love where he says there at the beginning, I therefore beseech you or beg you. So he's getting ready to beg them to think about something and to do something. And in that phrase, just following I beg you, he gives the motivation. He says, I beg you by the mercies of God. It's because of the mercies of God that I'm going to beg you to do something. I'm going to plead with you to do something. By the mercy of God. So often we can get caught in the trap of using our worship to appease God, meaning I wake up on Sunday, I don't feel like going and gathering with the saints, or it's raining outside and I'm not sure I really feel that into it right now, and but I know that I should, so I better go and God will be mad at me. And then we start using worship as a way to make sure God's just not mad at us. And we miss the real motivation of worship. It is the mercy, the tender mercy, the extending mercy of God that should then enliven us to say, He is worth my worship. He's worthy of it. It's the mercy of God, the greatness of God, the grace of God, the magnitude of God, the person of who God is should drive us to worship because it's Him and Him alone that we are worshiping. Worship was never designed by God for us to use it to try to prove to Him that we're righteous enough for Him to like us or save us or deliver us. That's not how worship was ever supposed to be used. That's not right. And so the motivation for worship is that we are moved by the mercy of God. The second thing this passage teaches us is the manner of our worship. He says there at the text that we should lay down our entire lives. We should offer ourselves specifically as a living sacrifice. Now, the old Hebrew Paul here, the great sage, wise teacher of the Old Testament, is playing on some words. He uses the word sacrifice, which was very familiar for the Jewish people. They knew what the altar was, what the temple was, and the animal sacrifice. And they had never seen an animal sacrifice go into the temple and then come out of the temple. of the courtyard there. That never happened. You know why? Because sacrifices that went into the courtyard were killed. They were dead. They drained them of their blood. They offered that sacrifice and they presented that to God as their offering to hopefully be made right with him. And so Paul here says, if you want to be moved by the mercy of God and worship God properly, that you're going to have to offer yourself as a living sacrifice. And so here's what he's putting together. That worship cannot be just a piece of your life. That true worship is not just that you, on a particular day, on a particular moment, offer to God a few things that he likes, and then you go on your merry way, living your life the way that you want to live. That's not how worship works. That's not how your life works. He says you're either all in, just like the sacrifice was, in the way that you live, that he has 100% of everything about you, or you're not. It's one or the other. And so my Monday to Monday, my Saturday to Saturday, my whole week is, God, I'm yours. And something powerful happens, something that every one of us desires. He says when you are moved by the right motivation and live with the right manner that you're laying your entire life down, something really great happens. He says you begin to discern the will of God. How many of you have wanted to know, what does God want from me? What's his will for my life? Where does he want me to go? What does he want me to do? What job should I take? Who should I marry? Where should I live? How many of you want to know the will of God in your life? He says, listen, I can't trust my precious will with people that are not sold out for me as the highest priority. I won't give it to you. But if you are moved by my mercy and you lay your life down for me, I can entrust into that person my will, and they'll begin to understand and discern what the will of God is. Sure hope today was a time of worship for you and that your heart was made right, calibrated to God's goodness, and ultimately that you will lay your life down this week and walk in the will of God.